Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Martial Way. Today, I have an amazing guest. I've been waiting to talk to this guy. Actually, we were just talking beforehand, and I didn't even want to talk too much because I want to save it for the conversation. But he holds the rank of 7th Dan, I believe, with the British Combat Association, British or English Karate Federation. I'm sure he'll let us know other associations that he's with. World-renowned teacher specifically in Kata Application and Bunkai. I'm sure most of you out there know him, and if you don't, you will after this. Please welcome Sensei Iain Abernethy.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. Again, man, like I said off the top, I know we're chatting a bit, but I want to save it because I'm so excited about this one. So it's been, so we'll jump in a second about your background and stuff, but I know, especially during lockdowns and stuff, I know you guys we're in strict lockdown where I am here in Canada. So most people are doing solo training or virtual training and kata training and things of that nature. So this is a nice segue into that as well, because, you know, a lot of people are concentrating so much on kata and stuff these days. And you know, and you are the expert. I mean, when I think of people, you and Patrick McCarthy are the two people that that always come up. So yeah, I'm completely honored. Yeah, really honored. Yeah. And even myself, so I have a background in Okinawan arts as well as Kempo. Then I transitioned into Kyokushin. And even now, like, there's a resurgence in Kyokushin because it's known for its sport, it's full contact, but also now people are, especially we were just talking off camera about getting older and stuff, getting deeper into kata and the understanding what are we doing here in the application. So I thought this would be great. So, well, sorry, that was a very long intro, but I am excited. So yes, for the 1 or 2% that are listening and don't know who you are, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and how you got started.
Yeah. So, Iain Abernethy, 49 years old, been training karate my whole life, pretty much since I was a little kid. As you say, 7th Dan with the British Combat Association, British Combat Karate Association, English Karate Federation would be the main ones. Wrote a few books 20 odd years ago that seemed to kind of catch the public's imagination, and I've been a full-time predominantly seminar teacher, I would say, you know, for the up until the pandemic, for the last 15 years or so. Again, primarily, as you say, the main bit that I teach that people are interested in is the functional real-world applications and training of the lessons recorded in the old traditional kata.
Yeah, and where did that interest come from? Like, was that from day one, or was there somewhere along your training that that you started to ask those questions?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things. So one is the self-defense side of things when I was younger always struck me as the most honest measure. You know, so of a person's skill, because, you know, if you think of like the competitive outlets, that's largely shaped by the rules. So you can change the rules one day and that you could have been the world's best and make a significant change to the rules and you're not now. You know what I mean? So I'd always thought that the self-defense side of things was an honest measure of progress. It was the bit that I was always most interested in. And then kata, you know, you start karate and I wasn't, you know, didn't even know what a kata was, but I remember vividly, so a young kid sitting on the side of the dojo waiting for the class to start, and one of the orange belts went through Pinan Nidan. And I remember seeing him doing it, thinking, whoa, what the hell's that thing? You know, really, I mean, looking back, it was probably not the greatest of performances, but to my young eyes, that thing's amazing. So I was dead excited about this, you know, learning these old forms, you know, so the kata always appealed, you know, for whatever reason. The self-defense side of things was always of primary interest. So I think those two kind of just naturally gel together in my own mind, really.
So there wasn't a pivotal moment. It was just a natural transition.
Yeah, there was, you know, there wasn't a road to Damascus moment where, you know, I kind of suddenly, oh my word, I'd underestimated these things. It was always so what's going on here?
Right.
Why is that functional? I do remember as well, it's not a story I've told off, but when I was younger, I would, at the weekends, my mum and dad would go out and they'd drop me off at my granddad's. So my granddad had a little bit of a garden next to the river that he lived at. So what I would sometimes do, my granddad would sit in his kitchen window, smoking his cigarettes and listening to his comedy tape things. And I would, I'll do a bit of karate, so I'd do the kata. I remember my granddad asking me, so what's all that? What you doing there? So I gave the stock answer. Oh, it's about coordination and fitness and all that kind of stuff. And he went, no, it's not. It's about dispatching the enemy. And then started to tell me all of, his military stories and his World War II days and his combative training. So the first guy I can ever remember telling me that kata's not about any of those things. It's about combat. Was a man who's never done karate in his entire life, but my grandfather just looked at it and went, nah, it's not, you know what I mean, and then started regaling me with his war stories and stuff. So I think that must have planted the seed as well, you know what I mean, that maybe it was all about.
That's a brilliant story, and it's amazing coming from somebody who is not a karateka but has that experience of combat and can see that. That's actually pretty amazing.
Yeah, tough man. My grandfather was at D-Day, Dunkirk. You know what I mean? Wow. He's a tough man.
Yeah.
So big guy too, huge, absolutely massive. Yeah, really big, strong guy. So yeah, I remember the conversation vividly. Just me and him in his kitchen with a strong smell of cigarette smoke.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Thanks for sharing that. I got to also say, usually when I do these, probably most of the guests are Kyokushin based, or and it's usually, and I always tell people it's not an interview; it's just free form conversation. Mm-hmm. You are the first one where I literally have like questions. Like I have so much stuff I want to ask you that's been like itching at me and folks. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to start digging into some of these.
Yeah,
you're the man that I wanted to go to. So I had a bunch of stuff here. So how is let me start with this one. Is the bunkai that you do and that you started applying, is it similar or the same as what applications they would be doing in Okinawa?
Well, there's a couple of things with that. So the one, obviously, in some cases we don't know, because those detailed, no YouTube of the day, karate books even weren't written until there was an audience for karate books. Yeah. And the karate that spread was what we'd now call the 3K karate, kata, kumite, and kion, and never the three shall meet. So really what we're looking at with the old texts and stuff is references to how they practiced and what the goals were. So what I can say is that it's congruent with the kata. It's congruent with the rules the old masters told us about kata, and it's congruent with the objective that they told us for kata. So we can't say it's exactly the same, but it's almost certainly going to be very, very similar, because of those facts. And I always tell people, the key thing for me is I'm not someone who's interested in historical reenactment. So I always say, I tell people that you can do a little thought experiment. So I always tell people, if, the cleaning out the house in Okinawa later this week, and they find Itosu's notebooks, and they now suddenly have the applications to every single kata. If one of those applications in those books, I believe, wasn't as effective as one that I was doing, I would still stick with the one that I believe was most effective. So I say I'm a pragmatist, not an historian. So what really matters for me is the way that I'm applying the kata today giving me the results that I want today? And it is. So that's the measure for me. Historical accuracy, we can't ever really know, nor do I really care. Is the kata serving the function for which it was intended for me and mine? And that's an emphatic yes. So some people go, we don't know what the applications were. And I say, I do. I know exactly what the applications are, because we have specific drills for every single specific movement in the kata that we do in my dojo. So my students know what the applications are for us. Now they might not be the same one as someone else teaches, but we know exactly what they're for us.
And so you keep karate evolving as well, because I find a lot of people, in a couple of previous shows we were talking about this, there's a lot of folks who get really stuck in that historical thing, and they want their karate to be like it was, whether it's 60 years ago or 100 years ago, whatever the case may be. Why wouldn't those guys, even those guys, wouldn't they have wanted us to evolve and take it somewhere else?
Well, and they did. You know, I mean, that's the thing.
Right.
There's not. I actually have a YouTube video I'm going to put out soon on this very topic, because there are the traditional. See, that's the thing. The tradition has always been one of constant change and innovation. Not a single generation passed karate on exactly as it was taught to them. And then, of course, what happens is, as karate became a modern Budo, and there became this disconnect between its pragmatic function. It started to be practiced for other purposes. Yeah. So kata started to be viewed as it's right because we say it's right, you know, as opposed to it's right because it's functional.
Right.
So at that point, you're measuring against things that are subjective as opposed to things that are objective. And that's when people go, oh, I care about whether it's pure, or I care about whether it's historically authentic. And I think, well, if you want it to be historically authentic, care about the same thing that they cared about, and that was combative function. None of them were writing, this needs to be the same as it was 100 years ago. So this weird thing is, if you want to be truly traditional, you have to embrace the evolution. Yeah. That's the true tradition.
Yeah, well said. I remember, so obviously less so in Kyokushin, but when I was studying Okinawan systems and Kempo as well, it was done the reverse of how I see it now. We were taught application first. So we would be taught different types of application, one-on-one drills with people. And then they would show us a kata where this stuff was all strung together. And that was almost like a last thought. Like the most important thing was the application. And now here's a little tool for you to practice at home so you don't forget the movements. And that was it. There wasn't too much, the emphasis was there. Now it seems to be the opposite. People put so much focus on the movement of the kata and less on the actual one-on-one application. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is because a lot of people have learned the katas without the applications. So when I'm doing seminars, normally people say, we want you to cover this particular kata. So what happens is the people already know the kata, and then I'm teaching them the applications to it. But in my own dojo, we teach them side by side. So I'll go, right, these are the first 3 moves of the form. Let's run through them. Okay, and then we'll go, okay, now here's the combative application of that sequence. So they learn them, or sometimes the other way around. Here's the drill, and then here's how it would be represented solo. So that they learn them within 5 minutes of each other. And to me, that really changes the way they view the kata and the performance of it as well. If you look at the kata, they believe it. They're not just dancing through these empty movements. They understand what every movement's for and why it's that way, why the stance needs to be here, why the hands need to be in this position. It's not just because I said so. It's because if you don't do it this way, he'll whack you. You know what I mean? If you do it this way, you maintain dominance. So yeah, I mean, and again, that's the more traditional way of doing it. The two, like Motobu talks about this. That they didn't use the term bunkai because bunkai means analysis. Yeah. So they often use if you look at the old text, they use the term kumite.
Yeah.
So Motobu, for example, would say kata and kumite were always taught side by side, meaning the kata and the applications of it were always taught together.
Yeah, and kumite was thought differently. We think of kumite today, it's almost like a sport where 2 people come together, where, back then it would have been much different. And also, even what you were just saying now, it almost brings out the aspect of aesthetics of the kata and how it looks versus its actual practicality. Again, like today, there's so much emphasis put on clean, proper technique for, again, probably sport. But is that really where the focus should be? Should it be, can this work?
Yeah. Well, I have this thing I say good aesthetics can come from function.
Yeah.
If you have a very functional, coordinated movement, that kata will be aesthetically pleasing. But you don't necessarily get function from aesthetics. Do you know what I mean? So it should be the other way around. So I love to see really sharp, clean, nice kata, because it means that the student's body control is really precise and exact. The coordination of the movement's really good, but you need it the right way around. So you tell them, you know, we're doing this movement this way for its function. And by default, it's not something we intend, but by default, it will produce an aesthetically pleasing movement. But we don't seek the aesthetically pleasing movement because that doesn't necessarily guarantee function.
Right. And I actually, I think I heard you in another interview or something somewhere. I don't know how good my memory is. I hope I got this right. It wasn't someone else, but you were talking about kata almost like freeze frames of the application that eventually you want to bring together in a nice flow, but the kata does break it down in these freeze frames that you can then analyze further. Was that, I hope that was that you that was
that was me. That
okay.
was me, yeah. But again, you think of my favorite quote for that is Genwa Nakasone in the book Karate Do Taikan, when he was expanding on Funakoshi's 20 precepts. So Funakoshi had said, beginners use stances, advanced students use natural postures. And that's sometimes misunderstood to mean, you learn stances, but then you forget about them. That's not what he means. What he means is these stances become the natural movements of the advanced student.
Second nature.
Yeah, exactly. And Nakasone went on to say, and I love this quote, he said, karate has many stances, it also has none. You know, it's a great piece of poetry to understand it. So if you freeze frame the movement. So at seminars, I always say, not that I've had one lesson in golf from a friend of mine, right? But I remember when he was teaching me to swing the golf club, he emphasized 3 positions I had to hit: the back swing, the point of contact, and the follow through. So if you're making a golf swing kata, you bang, bang, bang. You map out those positions. But when you hit the ball, you do hit all those positions, but you do so in a flowing way. So
perfect analysis or analogy.
Yeah, it always makes people laugh as well when I do the golf swing back with the bow and stuff. It's a good way to get the ball. Exactly. That's exactly how I do it. So and that's the point. Because if you get a beginner, so as experienced martial artists, you say, you know, shift your body weight in this direction. They do it. If you say that to a beginner, they what the hell's my body weight? You know, so you'll go, what I want you to do is take a step, keep your front leg bent, keep your back leg straight, and have your weight shifted into this position. So you get them to do the stance, so they learn the weight shift. That's the important part. So the kata's almost like it's the map. You know, hit this point, hit this point, hit this point. You know, it emphasizes the key points. A friend of mine who's an animator said that when they do animation, they talk about the key frames, which are the key images. They'll draw them first, and then they'll draw the ones between the key frames. You know, so the kata gives you the key frames, and then the application we flow through it. So
perfect analogy again.
Well, that's his analogy. That's it's not that much Jordan's. So it should be flowing. I always joke to my students: there's only 2 things that are still in a fight: unconscious people and people who are about to be unconscious. All of the time you need to be moving. You know what I mean? So although the kata freeze frames, that's for learning purposes. In the application, you don't freeze on those points.
So now I do have some questions around that too, but you struck something else to me. Again, perfect timing these days because a lot of people are training on their own. First, a lot of people that come from systems that there's not a lot of emphasis on bunkai or analysis of the kata. It can be quite overwhelming when they want to get into it. They don't know where to start. What's the best way to start? You're on your own. You perhaps belong to a dojo that doesn't have an emphasis on that. What do you do? Like,
well, because there can be a strange reaction to that too, because a lot of people learn karate as a long to mid-range kicking and punching system.
Right.
And then when they get in the bunkai, they realize, no, there's throwing, there's trapping, there's choking, there's strangling, it's a different art. Some people get really excited about that. You know what I mean? Like, oh, wow, there's all this other cool stuff. Some people get intimidated by it. You know, I'm comfortable doing what I do and don't want to know that there's a whole side to the art that I've never even looked at.
Yeah.
So normally when people do decide, yeah, I'm interested in this, it can be a little bit overwhelming because it just seems, oh man, there's so much stuff to learn. So my advice to people is start slow. There's lots of good resources out there now. You know, I mean, the wonderful thing about the internet,
like yourself.
I'm happy. If people think that my stuff helps them, then that's grand.
Yeah.
But start slow. Pick a kata that you really like, you're really into, and take the time to break that kata down. Learn to speak the language of kata. What are the stances representing? What are the angles showing you? What are the hand positions all about? And just take your time to learn it slowly. There's a lovely line from Funakoshi where he said, once you master one technique, you will realize its close relationship to all other techniques. Right. And when it comes to bunkai, that's really true. You know, as someone who spent, decades and decades and decades looking at this stuff, you start to realize that you often seeing very similar things packaged in different ways between all the different katas and the different styles. So once you learn to speak the language, the kata really start to speak to you. But it's just take your time, be in no rush about it.
Good advice. And even on that note too, it's difficult. Sometimes you'll come across people or instructors, which is kind of sad in my opinion, that will think they know the movement or the kata or application for a certain part of a kata, and they teach it almost like a religion. This is it. This is how they do it. Blah blah blah. And sometimes you're left scratching your head, like, okay, this is not practical at all. Or I'm trying to think of one like maybe Peanuts. Maybe Sona-san, maybe where you're like, you're not like this whole like
punching the guy behind.
Yeah, like it's like really. Really? Like my friend, actually, I think you might know him, Terry Burkert, Terry Burkert. Him and I were joking on his show the other day about like we're just like, he was like, how am I going to get my pythons? Things like that. And they don't leave the student the opportunity to question, like, maybe that's not quite the way, maybe is it possible it could be a throw or something, or whatever the case may be. So I think it's important to encourage people to keep asking those questions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then measure by effect. Mm-hmm. That should be the ultimate measure. So if someone says, you're deliberately turning your back on someone, then elbowing and punching them in a way that doesn't work anyway, because the distance is all wrong. Your elbow goes way back here. How far can your hand get? You know what I mean? It's you couldn't even touch him if it just doesn't make any sense.
No sense.
But then I'll show people. Yeah, but look how closely this movement resembles a mapped out hip throw. Look at the spin. Look at the scoop. Look at this movement. Look at a classical judo ogoshi.
Exactly.
And then and it's there. So if people go, no, my sensei said I'm elbowing and punching. Oh, okay. That's an impenetrable wall. You can't get through that. But anyone who has an open enough mind will go, well, that doesn't work, and this does.
Right.
So therefore, which is more likely to be the valid interpretation? So, yeah, it's important to have an open mind.
So that leads me actually to one of the questions I did write down, because it's one that does come up. So basically my question was, so it's hard to fathom that all the bunkai from old karate masters, for example, hikate, is a chamber. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, you're not going to fight somebody with your hands down. So what, in your opinion, what is a hikate? I have my own thoughts about it, but I'd love to.
Yeah, that's been one that I've flogged to death online, I think.
Oh, really? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. Much to my people's amusement, because I did a few videos maybe a year or two ago on hikate, and it got an incredible amount of pushback.
Oh, really? Okay, now I'm curious. Now I want to.
No idea that it could be such a controversial topic.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, no, it is to me. I think the problem with it there is, so what you've got within the kata, because the kata is self-protection based, self-defense based. So what you're talking about is fighting the guy who's there. You know what I mean? So
yeah, in your face.
Yeah, really close, within arm's length,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So when they shift karate to being, as it slowly evolves and becomes a modern Budo, and the distance is no longer here, but here, people go, well, why am I pulling my hand to my hip? And they invent theories as to why you do it. So the common thing is it's for power generation. So you throw this side of your hand back, and this brings this side forwards. And I point out to people, I don't know about you, but my torso has muscles within it. I can turn my body, look at that, magic. I can turn my body without having to rely on my arms, without making the massive tactical error of taking a striking tool away from the target and leaving myself wide open, right? And then if you look at the way our fists, our hands are designed, they're essentially good for two key things. They're good clamps and they're good clubs. They're good for hitting. So with a hikate, if you grip a person, you then feel their movement through proprioception. So you can then hit them more accurately with the other hand, and it's an intuitive way that human beings fight.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Grab with one hand, smash him with the other. You're a Canadian, hockey fight stuff, right? So so it makes perfect sense to me that what's the first technique most people learn in karate? To pull one hand to the hip. Why are they doing that? Because you clamp on with one hand and you hit with the other. So the hikate's got two main jobs. It's either gripping clothing, hair, you know what I mean? So you can feel where they are when you hit them, or it's clearing limbs. So if you punch a guy in the face, the instinctive reaction is this. Yep. You now can't hit him, so you grab the wrist and pull it down and punch. And the key here is, hikate translates as pulling hand. It's not power generation hand, it's pulling hand.
Right. And if you I think I had that in my, yeah.
And if you read the old texts, like Funakoshi's old text, his first book, he lists the different hand positions and what they're for. Yeah. And he's quite clear. He says hikate, because the purpose of hikate is to grip the opponent. You know what I mean? That's what it's there for. So this empty hand on the hip, it's a big no-no. I always tell my students, the little rhyme I use is active is best. So you want, especially at close range, you don't want a hand passive. You want the hands active. Two hands working together, clearing limbs, telling you where he is. So active is best, up when at rest. So if it's got nothing to do, it's up, never emptying down. So, that's it. Active is best, up when at rest, never emptying down. Right. So you never drop your arm if it's got nothing in it.
Illogical.
There's no point in doing it.
Yeah. And it is funny because I remember that the whole hikate thing, that's where I approached it from, because I was like, well, what's the translation of that? Pulling hand. It's kind of right there in front of you.
A bit of a clue there, isn't there?
Yeah, right. So when you, so what are the steps that you take or you advise people to take when they start analyzing a kata? Like, are there specific steps to it?
Yeah, and I try and teach that at the seminars as well. So it's not just, it's that, give a man a fish you feed him from a day, teach him how to fish you feed him for a lifetime. So whatever kata they want me to do, I'm always going back to, these are the combative principles you need to understand, and these are the principles of analysis you need to understand.
Okay.
But with the principles of analysis, there's three main ones that I think people should focus on. There are more, but they're the three main ones. So if I'm looking at a kata move fresh, I'll look, okay, what's the stance? Because the stance will tell me which direction the body is supposed to shift for this technique. So that will give me instantly, I've got clues as to what it is. What's the hand position? Both hands are active. We never have a passive hand, or very, very rarely have a passive, unactive hand. So what do the hand positions look like they may be doing? And the other big clue is the angle. So it's quite common nowadays, people think the angle represents the angle the enemy is attacking you from.
Right.
But that's false, flat out false. And this is well documented in the old text. The angle represents the angle you are attacking the enemy from, not the angle the enemy is attacking you from. So
wow. Okay.
So if the movement's at 45 degrees in the kata, it means you are 45 degrees onto him when you apply this movement. So if you look at so if you've got the stance, the hand position, and the angle relative to the enemy, you know where you are relative to them. From there, you can work out what the hands might be doing, and the weight shift will tell you which way you need the power to go. And that will normally start to open the doors so you can understand what the kata's all about.
Okay, that angle thing actually just kind of blew my mind. That's pretty. No, that's really neat. I never thought of that, because that's another thing used to drive me crazy in some katas. This whole, like, if something from your side, like nobody does that.
But if someone's punching you from the side, the first you'll know about it is when they hit you.
Yes, and if you don't, you're out of the way.
My eyes, as human beings, we're predatory animals. Our eyes are in the front of our head. You know what I mean? So the idea, it always makes me think you'd stand there where a guy's standing next to you. I would turn. Yeah. So and again, this is well documented. Taguchi talks about this. Right. Motobu mentions it in passing. Mabuni writes about it at length in his writing. Yep. The angle represents that the angle you are attacking the enemy from. And there's two sub rules to that people need to understand as well, which again can help them understand the kata. The first thing is, tactically, you want the enemy in front of you, because that's where our limbs move in that direction better, and that's where our eyes are. So you want the enemy in front of you, but you don't want to be in front of the enemy. Because that gives you a
right.
advantage. Yeah. So if the guy's attacking me from this angle, this arm is now effectively out of that fight. So that's the first rule. And the second rule is you move towards what you know and away from what you don't know. So if I make contact with one of your arms, I need to be moving in this direction. So I'm away from the arm I have no awareness of or control of, but I'm closer to the arm that I've got some control and tactile awareness of. Mm-hmm. So I think with all these bunkai rules, there's sub-rules. So, but for the angles, that's the key thing, is that the angle in the kata tells you the angle you are relative to the enemy. That's the analysis principle. Mm-hmm. And then the combative principles are, you need the enemy in front of you, but do not be in front of the enemy. So that gives you a tactical advantage, and move towards what you know and away from what you don't know, which again will give you a tactical advantage.
And again, there's a theme here. It's just logical. That just makes sense. It doesn't. It's like not a top secret thing if you just apply some basic.
No.
Yeah.
And once you start looking at the kata that way, it makes a lot more sense. So like, Taguchi said, do not be deceived by, the Embisen, and, the opponent is in front of you. Yeah. There's a Goju guy who said this. And then Mabuni said, the purpose of angles in kata is not well understood. Mm-hmm. And then he went on to say that, he goes, sometimes you hear things like, this kata moves in 8 directions and therefore is for fighting 8 people, or some other such nonsense, is what he said. he then goes on to explain that the kata, it tells you the angle it's attacking you from. So all of this is documented. It's there for anyone who chooses to read it. So
chooses to read it, but
exactly. But unfortunately, some people go, no, my sensei said that you're standing in the middle and the people are around you on the compass points. I mean, I joke about that too. I say, if you want to beat up a traditional karate guy, hit him from 60 degrees, because it'll blow his mind. It'd be like you punched him from another dimension, because they always train at 90 degrees or 45. It's got nothing to do with that. If you're halfway, if you're doing a kata and it suddenly spins behind, you've got the point in the kata where it turns back, just space management, right? So I always say that turns the sensei couldn't afford a bigger dojo turn. You've got the one where it comes back the other way. But within the middle of a sequence, if there's suddenly a turn in the opposite direction, it might be that turn's part of the technique, but it could also mean, okay, cut this for this new sequence, you're behind the enemy. And then, so you teach us in various ways to get behind, or to get to the angle, and then that's when this technique would be appropriate.
That's actually logical. And it also reminds me, so now I see in a lot of sport competitions, they'll have kata, but they'll also have this, I'm not a huge fan of it, so I don't know a lot of it, but you'll see it's almost like a bunkai kind of sequence. And it just reminded me, because you'll have like 4 or 5 people coming in, and it's just looks to me like a little silly. And again, Terry and I were talking about, we'd love to see have bunkai in a tournament situation, but throw somebody in there and have people attack. No idea what's coming. No, what do you do? I would love to see something like that.
A friend of mine has organized his tournaments on that basis. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what they started doing. Rather than these really choreographed affairs,
Yeah, it's a
So when they
dance.
introduced that, that's when I stopped kata judging. I was an area chief for
Okay.
kata judging. I was a chief judge for national finals at one point. And then when they brought in the bunkai, on the first day I did that, and I watched this very athletic, very impressive demonstration, but I thought, that's not bunkai to me. So after that final, I remember putting the flags down and going, I'm done.
Wow.
You know, I'm done, because I can't be seen to endorse that.
Right.
You know, it's not what the kata's all about.
Yeah. Nice to hear you say that, actually. And on that note, actually, and again, I'm sorry if I'm jumping all over, but it's just really neat for me. When karate or Tay or whatever you want to call it left Okinawa and it did go to the mainland, I mean, there's so much talk about how much was left behind, and part of it, my understanding from what I've read, is that mainland Japan, already had judo. It already had or jujitsu or jitsu of some form, so it didn't need the grappling. It didn't need any of that stuff. But one thing that was lacking was like Western boxing. So along comes karate that does have this limb movement that they can emphasize as a separate thing to judo, and hence so there was so much emphasis put on the kicking and striking. But I know folks like even Mabuni said there's so much that's been lost there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, well, it's exactly that. You know, so one of the things that, you know, at that time, you know, Japan has realized that from a military point of view, they are way behind the West. You know, so there's a real big concern about this. You know, we need to modernize quickly, and we need to get a modern military. And these old feudal arts are old-fashioned, violent, outdated. They're not fitting things for Japanese youth to be doing. Kano, the founder of judo, being the genius that he was, went, right, I get this. So one of the things we can do is this judo will produce strong bodies and strong characters, which will produce good recruits for our new and expanding military. You know, and therefore judo and kendo as well, because kendo did a similar thing, becomes very popular, these modern Budo arts. Yeah. So karate's on its last legs. It's dying out like a lot of the other martial arts are. Some of the practitioners there see the writing on the wall and think, okay, if our art's going to survive, it needs to fit with the prevailing culture. Mm-hmm. So a Budo version of karate gets produced, which is about healthy minds and healthy bodies. So at the start of this process, they ape judo to a massive degree. It's no longer karate, it's karate do. Let's train in lightweight judo suits. Let's have the judo Kyu-dan grading system. Let's use belts to illustrate this. So they copy an awful lot of judo. Funakoshi was one of the leading lights in doing this, befriended Kano, and they work together. Yes. One of the interesting things is Kano really liked karate when he saw it. And wrote a letter of recommendation saying, I approve of this karate. It will make a useful part of judo. Right. So at this point, you know, exactly what you say is that the karate needs its unique selling point. Yeah. You know what I mean? So the throwing side of it, which was part of it, we've got photographs of Funakoshi teaching throwing, his books have throwing in and all that kind of stuff. They start to emphasize more the striking. You know what I mean? So, and then later on, the generation after Funakoshi start making it into something like modern boxing. But boxing itself went through a similar thing. If you look at the old boxing manuals, they've got throwing and weapons and all kinds of stuff. You know, it seems to be a common process in most martial arts that they over time.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
in boxing.
Yeah, no. I mean, the story I tell is James Figg was the first champion of England. Yep. And if you read the fight reports of James Figg's fight, he fought a guy called Ned Sutton for this championship. First round was with swords. Second round's with sticks. Third round is the fist fighting, during which Figg got thrown. And then Sutton dropped his knee on him, so it took him 30 minutes to go to recover. Wow. And then the story is that, as I remember it, Figg threw Sutton to the ground and pinned him until he submitted.
Wow.
So old style boxing's got throws, a little bit of ground fighting,
That's
weapons.
crazy.
You know, it's a really holistic art. And then over time, you know, boxing becomes the noble art of self-defense. They clean it up a little bit, and it becomes it's specialized in fist fighting only. Kicking gets taken out of it, you know, with the rules and things like this. You know, it becomes a much more specialist system. And it'll say with judo. You look at judo's got know, striking in it and stuff. Yeah, all the martial arts tend to start quite holistic because that's what real combat demands. And then when they turn in on themselves and start concentrating on outfighting a practitioner of their own discipline, they tend to specialize in a given area, which has advantages and disadvantages. It means they get really good at that specific thing, but it means they're pretty much useless at everything else.
Right. And even on that note, I've heard, and it's kind of sad actually, but it's gotten better. But people, even jiu-jitsu guys, will make fun of karate and stuff without realizing, and the karateka as well doesn't realize it either. It's actually in there if they do the digging.
Yeah, but you know, it's one of these things that sometimes gets me a little bit with that, because I agree with both arguments, which might seem odd to people as a karateka. So because I think sometimes we're our own worst enemies.
Right. Yeah.
So you know, there's some people that don't do it, or they do it badly, or they see things like 3-step and 5-step sparring and the distancing. So it quite rightly, from a functional point of view, gets criticism. And then people get tribal about it. So they'll say, you know, no, karate's got this stuff. And I say, yeah, but are you doing it? And are you training it? You know what I mean? So sometimes the criticisms we get from outside are valid criticisms.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and people are practicing, like obviously in your dojo, you said you're doing it, and there are dojos that are doing it. Like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the karate culture guys. Yeah, they were actually on my podcast, one of the first guests, and the way they train. But at least from my perspective, I find it's few and far between that train like that. Like, what is your philosophy on that? Like, how do you train for this stuff? I mean, I would imagine it should look closer, in my opinion, it should look closer almost to jiu-jitsu training than solo kata training. It should be, you need that one-on-one, but I'd love to hear your...
Yeah, so I mean, here in the UK and generally all over Europe, it's quite widespread. You know, it's probably not as widespread as the alternative, but you can see year on year, people, you know, that looks more fun, that looks more, you know, functional. So you can see it's a growing movement, which is getting
awesome.
bigger all the time. Yeah, but in terms of the way that you train it, so I kind of summarize this. You know, if you're looking at kata specifically, you've got talk about the 4 elements, if you like, of training. So and there's not really enough, you should do all of these, but there's got the solo kata, which is the repository of knowledge. It's a supplementary form of solo training. It gives you a chance to practice things with visualization and full intent. You then move on to drill it with a partner in various ways, including equipment training, pad drills. You do the bunkai effectively, as people would label it today. When you've done the bunkai, you need to analyze the principles, the combative principles that movement represents. Understand that the kata is giving you an example of an idea. It's not saying this is the only way to do this. It's saying these are the kind of things you should be practicing.
Right.
You know, so and then you need live experience of actually doing it. You know, in various ways. So
under pressure.
Yes, you need, and again, that's gradual. Right. So you'll have lots of different forms of live training for specific methods, depending on the level of the student, what you're trying to work on. What I call kata-based sparring, but you need that live practice. And then, of course, you come back to the solo kata, and now it's a different beast, because every time you then do those solo movements, you're kind of triggering memories of all of those experiences of that live practice and that partner practice. So it no longer becomes an empty dance. It is a genuinely useful way of solo training, which supports the partner training too. Yeah.
And I think it probably also breaks that mold where people get caught in, these are the specific movements of a kata that you have to stick to, without realizing, no, these are just something to ingrain in your subconscious, if you will, to get into a natural flow. So you don't have to think about those movements. I always think of an analogy because my background originally, I used to be a musician. And I taught at the conservatory, and we used to, there's lots of running jokes around how to confuse like a classical person or how to confuse. But one of the things is with like a classically trained musician, they're absolutely phenomenal. They can run scales up and down. They know the kata perfectly, if you will. But if you throw them in a free form, let's just go jam. No sheet music. Let's just play. They don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right. And I find that similar to that. So it's almost like, for me anyways, as a karateka, I have to approach it more like a jazz musician. Sure,
Yeah.
I got my sheet music, I got whatever, but if you just want to throw down and play, let's do it.
And that's exactly the point. You know, that Funakoshi used a really nice analogy where he said that kata was like textbooks to a student and tactical exercises to a soldier.
Right.
Yeah, so in terms of textbooks to a student, there's your techniques. There's the knowledge that's came before. So you go to university to study a given topic, they have material that other people have developed to get you up to speed, right? So that's what one job the katas do. But the other thing is that they're like tactical exercises to a soldier. So when a soldier does tactical exercises, they're not saying the battle will be exactly like this. They're saying what we want you to do is develop good combative habits, so that in combat you fight in accordance with those habits, and therefore you are more likely to get a good result. And it's exactly the same with the way that the kata is supposed to work. No one is saying this is exactly the way the fight goes.
Right.
It's a mock fight. That's not what it is. They're saying these are an example of the principles that you need to internalize, so that in combat you will fight in accordance with those principles, and they'll naturally come out of you. So one fun thing we like doing, you know, sometimes you film students fight, and then afterwards you go, you know, see that bit there, that was straight out of Naihanchi, see that bit there, that was straight out of Gion, you know, and you can see it all. I've got examples of that online as well, if people want to see that. Like, if you type my name and kata-based sparring into YouTube, there's footage of me and with a couple of the guys sparring, doing this stuff, and you can see, you know, one bit where a student he grabs the back of my neck and tries and grabs my throat to open a move at Gion, and then the way that I clear it and push down and strike him is straight out of Teki, and then kicks me in the knee using the return and wave kick. You can see the kata being applied live.
I love that. I have a friend, Paul, and we do that when we watch MMA. You see it in MMA, and it's funny because people say, there'll be people like, oh, there's no karate in MMA, there's no classical, there's no. What are you talking about? It's all the time. It's there all the time. You're just not identifying. If you do those freeze frames like you're talking about, and again, the Karate Culture guys did some great videos of that too. Looking at MMA.
I'm in one of them.
Yes, that's right. Actually, yeah. So that's really, really cool. So here's a question for you, Sensei. Where did people go wrong in the West, especially with the application and stuff? Like some of the, like we were talking about earlier with the punching over and stuff.
Well, I think that's because what you had was, of course, as this Budo version of karate becomes popular, it hits the universities. That's a primary method for spreading the art, you know, through the universities. So you've got young students who learn for the duration of their time at university. So they learn, and what the primary goal there is, you know, fitness, discipline. It's not really about combative function anymore. It's about producing fit, strong bodies for the military. You know, that's its primary objective. That's why it's popular there. So that's the version that people learn. So the bunkai side of things falls away. It's just learn the kata. The application doesn't matter anymore. Learn the kata. And then they become a generation of teachers. So that they teach the karate as it was taught to them. And then, of course, at some point, people go, well, what's this movement for? And at that point as well, you know, the competitive elements becoming popular. So people start to think of karate as this mid to long range fighting system. So the kata gets reanalyzed through that lens, you know what I mean, that long range fighting. So it's a block with your hand on your hip, and then you step forwards and punch. You know what I mean?
Perspective is everything. Yeah.
Yeah, the perspective has changed. So therefore, they come up with incorrect conclusions about what the movements are for, and they never pressure test them, and then that starts to spread. So I think that in the long-term history of karate, this karate that developed in the 1940s and was what largely spread to the West in the 60s and 70s, you're talking a 20-year period there. You know what I mean? So I think that, given another 100 years, future historians will look back and they'll see it as an historical blip. You know what I mean? It was necessary for karate to evolve to not become this thing that was practiced by a handful of people in Okinawa, to become this global phenomenon. It was important that it fitted with the zeitgeist of the time, and that had some unintended consequences that were then quickly corrected in the historical time frame.
Right.
So I'm sure future generations will look back at some of the texts that came out during the 60s and 70s and look back and think, yeah, that was what happened there. That was weird. But I think it'll be a blip overall.
Well, and people like yourself are playing a huge part in that, in that evolution. And on that note, where do you see the evolution, or where do you hope to see the evolution of karate going? No matter if it's Shotokan, Shito, whatever, just karate as a whole.
Yeah, I've always, the styles don't matter to me. The styles came late.
Yeah,
exactly. And if you look at a lot of the old masters, were quite skeptical about the idea of styles. Funakoshi said, I've heard myself and my colleagues referred to as the Shotokan school. I strongly object to this attempted classification. Right. And then he went on to say that all karate is one. So I always say it's like if you and I were to write the same thing down, our handwriting styles may be different. Right. But it doesn't mean the message is obscured. So it doesn't matter whether you do. I always say as well, when people go like Kyokushin kata or Wado kata or Shotokan kata, no, that's the wrong way around. You should say, this is the kata as done in Kyokushin. This is the kata as done in Shotokan, because the kata predates the style. Right. You know what I mean? So the message is the same, regardless of which version you practice. But that evolution is really kind of, it's on its way now. I see more and more people year on year like this holistic version. It's got a lifespan. You can do it your entire life. It's not like the competitive version of karate, which reaches a certain point and then, okay, I have to stop now, or I'm not been successful. People can learn this stuff at any point in their lives. They can continue doing it. It gives that
practical.
Yeah, exactly. It gives that life skill of self-defense. People like to learn a useful skill. Yeah. So that side of things happening, and then obviously it'll continue to evolve. So my aim or my hope, so a lot of people like what I do now, what I mean? But I would hope in, say, 30 years, people look back and go, it was okay for its time, but we've moved on. Right. You know what I mean? I want karate to do well, so it has to keep evolving as training methods improve and knowledge of sports science improves.
Exactly.
And, arts learn from one another, and, it should keep on going. Again, this is another Funakoshi quote, times change, the world changes, and martial arts must change too. And then he said that the karate that students learn today, high school students learn today, so the university students, he says, is a long way from he's different from the karate of 10 years ago, and is a long way indeed from the karate I learned in Okinawa as a child. So this evolution has always been there, and it should continue.
And again, it strikes me as so odd that it is changing now, but for a long period of time there, for 20 or odd years or whatever, people were really locked in. Nope, we have to do it the way that these old masters did it, when they themselves were preaching the evolution. It's
a very strange thing. So I know, so some would regard, so that there are, for example, there are elements that I've introduced to our karate. That people may look back, well, that wasn't there, and I think, but things like, for example, let's take the roundhouse kick.
Right.
Go to people, name a karate kick, and I guarantee 50% of people go roundhouse. It's the quintessential karate kick.
Yeah.
But it wasn't there.
I know.
Years ago.
It never existed.
No, it's not listed in any of the old books. You don't see it in print until the 1950s. Right. And the reason for that is close range, things like kicking the shins and those scooping kicks work really well, But roundhouse kick is a technique where generally you need a little bit of distance to pull it off. So when they start fighting at a distance, roundhouse kick really comes into its own. Right. But when the guy's right in front of you like that, kickings have got a very minor role anyway.
Exactly.
So if the roundhouse kick can become part of karate to the point where it's just, yeah, it's the karate kick, why can't we bring other things in? So in, 50 years, people go, oh yeah, that traditional thing,
Again, yeah, that's where I'd love to see. Like, I see these systems, like, and I have huge respect. Like, what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu did is just unbelievable, and the evolution of it, quick evolution of it. And then you have other systems, Muay Thai, whatever the case may be. You have these, and I see karate as this potentially completely holistic system that contains all of it. You have the grappling, striking, you have the long range fighting, you have short range fighting, you have all the components that are found in all these other systems. So why would you not just train it like that? It's this complete whole art.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, exactly. And I like holistic martial arts practice.
Mm-hmm.
Can't be an expert at everything, but we should be a beginner in nothing. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the one caveat to that is, in terms of the traditional karate and the traditional kata, it's very holistic from the context of civilian non-consensual violence.
Right.
So self-protection. Yeah. It doesn't cover the things that two experts involved in a consensual duel would maintain.
Yes.
So it doesn't contain feints or back and forth footwork and that kind of stuff. But again, you can add that in. So my guys, we train the kata side of things for the self-defense element. Mm-hmm. And then we have the distance skills that we do for the fighting element. You know what I mean? Because we like all of it,
Yeah, and I think, and you will probably correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I think it was Motobu who actually talked about that karate was meant for people who are untrained, an untrained person attacking you.
Yeah. He wasn't alone in that either. Itosu said a very similar thing, that karate is not intended to be used against a single adversary. Right. It's a method of avoiding injury if one by chance should be confronted by a villain or ruffian.
Yeah.
It's not self-defense. I think there's sometimes a confusion around that though as well. So untrained doesn't mean unskilled.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah,
good point.
Go, if it would help you beat up some guy who's not trained, there's an arrogance that martial artists have. So one of my best friends, right, real close friend of mine, will be the first to admit that he couldn't meet a lovelier guy now, right? But in his past, he was a trouble past and a very violent man in his past, right? This guy has had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fights, because and never beat, right? Never beat. And I remember talking to him about this once, these street fights that he'd had. And he said, what I'd do is, he goes, I'd hit them with my right. If they were still standing, I'd grab them and headbutt them. If they were still standing, I'd run away. Right? So that's his fighting system, the bare bones of it. Right. Now, in that environment, he is the apex predator. He will take out champions because he'll knock them out before they even realize they're in a fight.
Right.
You know what I mean? But if you stick him in a judo tournament, he's not going to do particularly well.
Right.
I always like it, if you're in the ocean, you fear the shark. On the African plains, fear the lion, right?
Right.
The shark flapping around in the middle of the African sun is not going to be that big a problem to you. So untrained doesn't mean unskilled. What they're saying by untrained is they mean not a fellow martial artist that you're engaging with a consensual duel. And one of my instructors has a great analogy for this, Peter Constantine, lots of real world experience here. So Peter makes the point, he said, when martial artists fight each other, they have a consensual duel. He said it's two skilled players sitting down to play chess. He says, and sometimes a skilled martial artist sits down to play chess with the criminal and is surprised when the criminal throws the pieces at them and then proceeds to smash the head in with the board. So there's no doubt who the best chess player is, but there's a misunderstanding that the criminal wishes to play chess. That they don't. So when the old masters talk about untrained people, they don't mean unskilled. They mean what is appropriate based on the nature of criminal violence, non-consensual criminal violence.
Yeah, that's brilliant, actually. Man, there's a lot of nuggets in this one. I might be chopping out pieces here. I really appreciate that. Have you spent any time in Okinawa training?
No.
You haven't?
Japan, yes. Okinawa, no.
No. And what about Japan when you were there? Was there any focus? Like I know I don't know a lot of people outside in other systems, but one of my favorite people is Andre Bertel. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Andre.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what we would call him, if it's bunkai, what he's doing, but he does a lot of at least the application of kihon in a very practical self-defense manner.
Yeah, his movement's beautiful. Very,
Oh
very
my
impressive.
God, spectacular.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I really like what he does. Yeah.
I guess I'm curious is how rare is that in Japan? Do people actually train that way? Did you see more like application of bunkai and things like that Andre is doing?
I think for my so obviously I didn't tour around Japan training in every dojo, but for the ones that I did train with, it was the same as it is everywhere else in the world.
Really, eh?
Yeah, you get. I would go to one club and it was all sport kumite. Right. I went to the next one and I stand in horse stance for 40 minutes doing agiyukis.
Right.
You go to the next one and it's very practical and close range. It's just the same as it is everywhere. I think one of the issues is because you sometimes get this, they'll go, it seems to be Westerners that are leading this change. And I say, no, it isn't. It definitely isn't. The same thing is happening in Japan as well. But as Westerners, if I want applications of Pasai, for example, I type PASSAI bunkai. So I type it out with Western characters, and unsurprisingly, I get Western search results.
Right.
You know what I mean? But if I was to type it out in kanji and katakana,
I've done this.
I'll get the Japanese results of it as well, which is not a bad trick if you want to see what the Japanese are doing.
Yeah.
So I have the major advantage of being an English speaker, so which is the first language for great swathes of the world, and is a very popular second language in great swathes of the world.
Yeah.
The same can't be said of Japan. So the fact that I'm an English speaker opens me up to a wider audience. So it's not just Westerners doing this stuff. It is definitely not. There are lots of Okinawan and Japanese people doing incredibly great things, very, very similar to what you're seeing from the Westerners. It's just that if you're an English speaker, you're going to find other English speakers who are doing that stuff.
Yeah, fair enough. Because I was curious in Okinawa because they're, I don't know, lack of a better word, closer to the roots, if you will. Especially arts like Goju and Weichi and Shotokan, where I was wondering if they how much emphasis they put on it there, or did they venture more into the sports side of it?
Yeah, I think the same thing happened, because the version of karate that was popular was that 3K Budo karate, and that was so it feeds back to Japan as well, and so to Okinawa as well. So you see the same things, good and bad karate everywhere you go in the world, everywhere.
Yeah. And one of the other questions I had that I wanted to ask you, it's kind of off, but it's similar here. In terms of variations and practicing the katas so that it becomes useful movement, like self-defense. So, for example, you have a video that I have, actually, Bunkai Jitsu 1, and there's two variations of the same drill. So there's a primary and a secondary, and they all seem to be, they're vastly different. So I'm just wondering, where is the origin of that second variation of the kata movement? And does it come from the same, like, how does it come up?
Yeah, so that's so you've got three key checks for me for validity when you're looking at the function of a movement. So the movement has to be the same as the kata. You can't go radically altering it. You know what I mean? Well, within, obviously, if you're doing it with a taller person, your arm position might change a little bit, obviously. So it doesn't have to be in exactly the same position as the kata, but the general movement should be the same, right? Any bunkai shouldn't be at variance with the rules of bunkai that the old masters gave us. And above all else, it should work. So it is possible that you may look at the kata one way, and I'll look at the kata another way, and both of those applications fit the kata, fit the principles, and work. So in my view, they're both correct. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Because they both work, right?
Mhm.
And then what I would encourage everyone to do is you choose or you run with the one that you think, yeah, this is the best one for our overall learning package and everything else. So in my own dojo, we go, this is the primary application for this. This is the one. If people are going to know what's the application, it's this. So when you learn the kata, you will learn this application.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So you learn the first movements of pin and showdown, and we go, this is the two-person drill to get you started on that. That is the application, which we'll refer to as the primary application.
So as a student advances in your school and they're making it up their way towards Shodan, by the time they get to Shodan, not only do they have a catalog of kata there, but for each of them, they also now have a catalog of at least base application movements.
100%. Yeah. So they learn the kata much slower than most.
Right.
So by the time they get the first down, they typically know the pinans and Nahanchi or Nahanchi Shodan. It typically takes 8 years in our school to get the first down, but they have two-person bunkai drills and all the variants for every single one of them. So
awesome.
they learn it
Oh my God,
in a
awesome.
lot of depth. And then as they're getting near to that point, so when they hit the second kyu and above, one of the grading requirements is we call secondary bunkai. They have to show. So, and that's part of making sure, you know, that this evolution I've talked about continues.
And they're understanding it. And...
Yeah, exactly. So I say to the students, you know what we do it as, but you also understand the principles of kata. So look at that movement again and tell me what else could it be. You know what I mean?
Brilliant,
so,
brilliant.
Yeah, so my aim at that point is that they may go on to start their own schools or dojos, and they may decide, well, I know what Ian's primary was, but I think this is better. So the secondary while they were with me will become their primary when they start teaching on their own. So it's my way of trying to ensure that Ian Rue never exists. You know what I mean? Because they're encouraged to second guess me as they go. And we have had that happen. I've seen students do applications. I go, okay, that is now it. That is now it. That is better than what we had. You know what I mean? So they know they've got an input into it as well. You know, it can never be monkey see, monkey do's to me. At that point, they have enough experience to make they're educated enough, and I want them thinking about stuff. So if they've got something valuable to say, I want them to be able to feed it back into both our collective development and their own individual development as well. So that's what we call secondary bunkai. Is second guess me, see if I'm wrong. And in my material, I share both.
I would assume then you're turning out some pretty well-rounded students.
Well, that's the intention. Obviously, they always impress me. You know, you know when I watch the gradings, you know, we had a couple of guys do their first dan. Thankfully, the father and son. So cool. The COVID restrictions haven't caused a problem for them because they're in the same household and bubble. So it was frustrating teaching them in the run up to the dan grade. Yeah, because we were in the dojo at that point. We weren't in full lockdown. But I could go nowhere near them.
Right.
So I'm going to go, no, put the hand, you know. That kind of but when we watched them do their grading, I was like, yeah, that's what a first dan should look like. You know what I mean?
That's terrific. That's awesome. Yeah. And also, I was wondering, this is going to be, I'm curious what you'll say about this. In your opinion, is it better to have a system with no forms and just a list of moves like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or is it important to have those kata?
Well, I mean, you know,
I know
each
where
to their own.
Right.
Each to their own. But so one of the reasons I like kata, a non-practical reason, is I like the history of them. I like feeling part of that tradition. So karate as a vehicle for exploring the martial arts appeals to me in a way that other systems may not. So that there's, you know, I always say I'm a martial artist first and a karateka second. So I want to learn the martial arts, and karate is the vehicle I have chosen to learn the martial arts. And part of that is because I like feeling part of a tradition. So that's a subjective value for me. So I like having those kata there. In terms of a practical thing, I think it is important to have a supplementary form of solo training. And you even see the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu crowd, you know, once this lockdown hit, they were coming up with solo methods all the time. I watched a great video by René Gracie where he was saying that they'd started doing these solo drills and that they could see so much value in them that they were
interesting.
doing these solo drills after the pandemic had finished, because they found as I remember the video, the fact that students had a chance to concentrate on their own movement in isolation took care of that side of things when they then start working it with a partner. Now, and of course, they're doing it right as well, because they're not doing these solo movement as an end in itself. They're immediately trying to think about how this works with the partner and pressure testing it and all that kind of stuff. But what I would see them doing, I'll recognize it as kata being correctly applied. So having a supplementary form of solo training is important. The other reason why I think kata is, in my mind, is something as a must. When you're talking about that non-consensual criminal violence, we have to realize that these techniques are designed to cause a great deal of damage to the human being. But we don't want to cause damage to people when we train. So I always say we do everything deliberately wrong, you know, all the time when we train. So, you know, people start training, we practice these methods that are designed to hurt other human beings, and we all go home in one piece. So by definition, we've done everything in that training wrong. We are deliberately introducing faults, you know what I mean? So, and that fault might be, well, we pad them up, we limit striking to certain areas, but I think you need to shine a bright light on that fault so the student knows it's necessary for safety, right? So if you're doing a technique where, let's say you violently smash a guy in the throat and then violently crank his neck, right? Every time you do that with a partner, you're going, I'm just pretending. So that fault needs corrected somewhere.
Right.
So the way you can correct it is you can do it solo with visualization, with full aggression and full intent. So when I do the kata movement, it's bang, woof, you know, I do it with, like, I really mean it. And now in that form of training, I have the fault that I haven't got a partner, but I have the positive that I'm doing it with full aggression and full intent. When I'm working with a partner, I have a real partner, but I'm always holding back.
Sure.
So I think kata provides one of the ways in which you can do it without holding back. And any training method is incomplete in and of itself. It's what I call the training matrix, when you've got all of the bits together. So, you know, for example, if I'm sparring and I don't want to, you know, batter the guy, you know, so I'll spar light. So I've got a living, breathing person there, but and I'm laying, get the skill to get the hand on the target. And to get the power, I'll go onto the pads. But the pads aren't the person. But you put the two together, the pad work has given me the ability to hit hard, and the sparring has given me the ability to get the hand to the target. You know what I mean? So there's always these little faults there, and what you've got to try and make sure is the training, the faults in one training method are corrected by the faults in another training method.
Yeah.
So for me, kata is part of that. You know, making sure that we have that element of the training matrix. So it's not for everyone, but that's why I do kata. That's why I think it's important.
Yeah, and I like that what you said around the emphasis on the aggression and intent, the kime, if you will, in kata practice. So you're not, it makes the kata come alive. So you're not just going through movements for the sake of movements, but when you're doing with actual intent, true visualization, it makes that kata, for me anyways, explode. Like
absolutely. And I always said to my students, it should be, I use the term, it should be a 3D training experience.
Right.
Yeah, so if you're just going through the movements, it's a two-dimensional.
Yeah.
But if you're feeling it and in your mind's eye, it's really happening. Human beings aren't good at the difference, good at telling the difference between reality and fantasy. Our whole entertainment industry is based upon that fact.
Yeah,
exactly. I watch a movie and I go on an emotional journey, right? When my logical part of my brain knows light has been shone into my eyes. That's all that's happening. But my physiology treats it like a real experience. So when you're doing the kata, if you're doing it right, and you've done all that partner work and you've done all that live practice, when you come to do the kata, it's that 3D experience. As far as your subconscious is concerned, it's another real fight you've had. You know, it's another experience, and then you can draw on these experiences when you know, if you're ever unfortunate enough to find yourself in that situation. But it needs, you know, 3D.
Yeah, and neuroscience has showed us that visualization does work. I mean, that's why high caliber athletes do it. I've mentioned this many times on here. Different studies that have been done on that, where in a lab they now know, like, if you visualize throwing a basketball all week, and then at the end of the week and you actually throw it, you've improved. So something is happening there.
100%. And the great thing about kata is you're not just visualizing what you're doing; you are physically repeating the same movement as you visualize it.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Both.
So that's another, which again, some people go, well, in the modern age, why do we need kata to record these techniques? Why can't we just use video?
Right.
And the reason for that is, although some people might like it to be different, watching YouTube videos isn't training. You know what I mean?
You're quoting my own sensei right now.
But so if you're the very act of learning a kata means you're already starting to connect those pathways and everything else as you're learning it. So that's when kata, when it's used right, it is very, very useful. But like any tool, it's all down to really how it's used.
How important do you think it is, and we touched on this a little bit earlier on, to bring back the original intention of the kata? Is it important at all what they did when they first came up with that movement, or should we just focus on our interpretation and the evolution of it?
Well, so long as people have so long as it's working for them, I think it would be my thing. So, like I say, for each and every kata, we have a series of drills that people learn as they learn the kata, and it all fits together nicely. There's a training progression. Each movement leads into the next. They learn all of these skills, and at the end of the day, they have functional skills that they can actually utilize. So for us, it's working. But if I had if someone else was teaching the bunkai a little bit differently, but it's still getting the same results for them, then it's correct. It all has to be objective.
Yeah, and that leads me to the next thing. I guess if people want to educate themselves, what would you recommend? Book series, videos? If they don't have that within the dojo, what is the next step? People like yourself, I mean, you have a great catalog of material as well. What's your recommendation there?
Yeah, we'll just start looking at the stuff that's out there, I would say. So pick a kata that you want to break down, so you've got something you can hang all your learning onto.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the one that I'm going to use as my vehicle for exploring bunkai generally. And then, do your research, see what other people are doing, compare other people's stuff. There's lots.
I was just going to say, you need a bullshit radar as well, dude.
Oh, yeah, you do. And that's why I think look at lots of, because part of the trouble now that there's so much information out there, sometimes good content gets lost among the noise, which is why, if people follow me on social media, you'll see that I'm always giving other people signal boosts. I'm always sharing other people's stuff, so if I go, this is good, even if it's different from what I do, but, it's good, I'm going to share it. So to try and get as much good information out there as I possibly can. And then look at what everyone's doing, find the approaches that resonate with you. Generally, it's better not to, people like my stuff, don't just do everything that I do. Right. Look at what other people are doing as well, because there might be an element of something other people does that suits you better. And start to develop your own approach to it. There's lots of content out there now, so explore it and plug into that community too. So I've got like a forum on my website, which is really active. Lots of people on there. You can talk to people, share information. Loads of Facebook groups and that kind of stuff. It's not like it was in the pre-internet age where your karate community was the people in the dojo. Plug into that global community. Ask questions. The good people are out there willing to help you, and there's lots of good information out there. So, if that's your thing, connect with the people that are doing it, and you'll find, we're a friendly bunch. You'll be welcome to have you on board.
I also like too in some of your videos, you still have the emphasis, like you do have a lot of pad work and things like that, and how important it is to have that real contact and stuff. So it's really cool too. So people need to keep that in mind. They need to keep that a part of their thing. So if people want to learn more about you, what's the best way to find you, best way to see your stuff?
Undoubtedly, it would be website would be a good place to start. So it's Ian spelt the Scottish way due to my fiercely proud Scottish grandmother. So it's Ian Iain Abernethy, not Nathy. A lot of the Americans, because that's the way the surname moved over the Atlantic.
I know.
So
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah. So it's Ian Abernethy with an E, not an A, not Nathy. IanAbernethy.com or .co.uk. It'll take to the same website. And social media, I'm dead active on. You know, it's rarely a day goes by where I don't put something out. So Instagram, it's at Iain Abernethy. Twitter at Iain Abernethy. Facebook is Facebook/Iain Abernethy.
And I'll put the links in as well. And that would be a good
place for people to start as well, because you'll see I'll throw my stuff out. And, you know, my friends' stuff that I really like. There's lots of good content there. I have a newsletter that I send out quite regularly. People go to my website, they can sign up to the newsletter. And if they're serious about this stuff, I have an app.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, really good way, because there's audio lessons. There's over 1,000 hours of exclusive video on there. It's all broken down by kata, pad drills, sparring drills. We do regular online live training sessions, so that's a good way to connect with the community. So undoubtedly, of all the things I do, the app is my favorite project. Definitely the best value for money. So.
Awesome.
You know, for less than a cup of coffee a week, you get, you know, thousands and hours of stuff. So yeah, that's another good way if people are interested in that.
Yeah, and again, like a lot of this audience is Kyokushin people, and I know firsthand, like all the kata that we have, you can find stuff in Sensei Iain's material.
Yeah, and within actually, that's the other thing, is obviously some of the Kyokushin kata that vary quite a bit.
Sure. Yeah.
From other ones. So if you think of Kankudai, Kishanku, is quite different. Well, again, all those differences are covered. So in the app, there is a specific bit on, and these are the bunkai for the Shotokan the Kyokushin variant.
Yeah, so, which is awesome.
It's all in there. Yeah.
Yeah. And as for putting material, I can attest to it, because as I was just setting up before this conversation, I noticed you had posted like within 30 minutes before something up there, and it was something I wanted to read. I'm like, oh my God, but I got to prep for this. So you do have a lot of material. Your posts, you're really active.
Yeah, I do. Well, I mean, you know, I like to keep busy, and I'm lucky that there's a lot of people seem to like what I do, and I'm really pleased about that. So not
it helps that you're a likable character too. The way you come up. No, really though, even in this, but in your videos and stuff as well, it is.
Well, it's nice of you to say. I'm not sure everyone would agree. But part of that as well is, you know, I try and make it. One of my main instructor actually had a beautiful phrase which really stuck with me, where he said about teaching. He said, good teaching is 80% training and 20% entertaining.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I've always thought, you know, if training doesn't need to be dry and boring, so if I can make it a little bit more fun and interesting, then it's easy to absorb the information. My best review for a seminar I ever got, I loved this. This bloke did it was a seminar I taught, and he was there for the full weekend. And after it, he wrote a rather in-depth blog post on what he'd learned. And he wrote, in summary, he said it was 2 days of stand-up comedy with some karate thrown in. And I thought, I absolutely love that. If that was his experience, I'm really happy.
That is good. and I mentioned this on here before, like, because I've done some neuroscience in the background. That it's true. Like, there's, again, studies done. If laughter is added, humor is added, people retain. If it's dry, they kind of tune out, but they'll always remember the chuckle that went along with it, and it will help get it in there. So
yeah, you know, that's it. And that doesn't mean, you know, the training's not serious or focused.
No, of course not. Yeah,
you know, when the time comes to do it, we'll do it. We'll do it full bore. but in the interim, you know, it doesn't need to be overly dry all the time. I always say it's funny, really, because the things that got me into trouble at school are now the things that people applaud me for. The fighting and the not taking things too seriously and things. You know, people go, yeah, I like that. that, so it's strange. Yeah.
It's been such an honor and pleasure. I know we've gone quite a bit of time here, but and I could probably keep on going, honestly, but I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, your busy schedule to do this with me. And yeah, it's been an honor.
Yeah, most great. That's gone quick. I mean, I've looked at my watch. I didn't realize it was long. But yeah, well, I hope that people find some value in it. And if I'm more than happy to come on anytime you like. As I say, if there's one thing I love doing, it's talking martial arts. So
yeah,
happy to do it anytime. Yeah.
And you're still so passionate about it, which I love. You've been doing it for 150 years now. It seems like, and you're still like just as passionate. It's amazing.
Yeah, never stopped being fun. It's never stopped being fun. You know what I mean? So. Yeah, I enjoy it, so I'm glad that
it's
comes
infectious.
across.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and if anybody has any questions, drop them in comments or whatever, and we'll make sure they go to Sensei. And yeah, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Scott. Much appreciated.